Welcome to the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast, where we hope to inspire you to embrace your God-given gifts, skills, and passions in order to lead with confidence. I'm your host, Esther Littlefield, a pastor's wife, business owner, mom, and writer. My co-host is Holly Kane, and together we chat about important issues that Christian women leaders face. In addition, we interview other women just like you who lead in various roles, from church to community to business. We're so glad you're here with us. Hey there, I'm your host, Esther Littlefield.
And I'm your co-host, Holly Kane.
And we are so happy you're here with us today. And we have been going through a series on goal setting. So today we are actually wrapping that series up. So far, Holly and I have been discussing how to reflect before you set your goals, how to dream and create a vision for your future, and different approaches to goal setting. And then in the last episode, I chatted with Jill McCormick about how our personality affects our goal setting. And that was a great conversation. If you haven't listened, I encourage you to go back and listen to that one. So we've made it to this last part of our framework, which is about how to actually accomplish the goals that we're talking about. And whether that's a clear-cut goal, or whether you're one of those people that has just kind of a vision for your year or a word for your year, we want to help you implement that and accomplish that vision and those goals. So we don't want you to go through this whole process and set some goals that make sense for you, and then just to kind of fizzle out in a couple months and end up giving up on it, right?
Yeah.
And or get
I'm way too familiar with that.
Yeah. I think we've all been there for one reason or another. Whether we love goals or hate goals, I think we've all had the experience of not accomplishing what we wanted to accomplish.
Right.
But what we do want to make sure that we're clear on is that ultimately your life, these goals, all of it is in God's hands. So it's important to keep God at the center of this process and to be praying and seeking Him for what He would have you to work towards in this year or in your life. So your role is to put in some effort and to do the best that you can with what you've been given, but it's really ultimately God who brings the results.
Yeah.
So
when I made my goals, I put a little board on my desk that has my Q1 goals. But right at the bottom of that, I actually put a verse. Just help me remind myself about that. And I just wanted to share it with you in case it encouraged you. So it's Proverbs 19:20-21. And it says, listen to advice and accept discipline, and at the end you will be counted among the wise. Many are the plans in a person's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails. And so I just really like that because it shows both sides of the coin that, we are to be listening to advice and accepting discipline and trying to, do what we know is right. But in the end, it's the Lord's purpose and His kingdom that is the number one goal. So just to try to remind yourself of that when you go through your goal setting and actually accomplishing those goals, just to remember that and hold them loosely.
Yeah, and also that we want to make sure too that if you set some amazing goals and accomplish them, or set some goals and don't accomplish them, you are still completely loved, and it doesn't change your worth and value in God's eyes.
Right.
So don't get hung up on, whether or not you are less than or better than anyone else. And we talked about that with Jill some, that, the comparison. We don't want you to be comparing yourself to anyone else. We just want you to be talking to God about this, and we want to try and just bring you some tools and some resources to help you along the way.
Yeah.
So before we get started into talking about how to help you accomplish your goals, I want to let you know that this episode is brought to you by the Confident Leader Club. So I'm excited to let you know about this new community that I've created just for you. And this is a community for Christian women leading in ministry or business. And it's perfect for you if you have a desire to have a deeper community and connection with other leaders, if you want accountability towards reaching your goals, and access to all the downloads that I've created and that we've created here for the podcast. as well as monthly bonus content, including workshops
Mhm.
and trainings on specific topics that will help you grow as a leader. So, if you want to find out more about this club, just visit confidentleaderclub.com to learn more, and you'll see all the information there.
I'm so excited that you created this club. I think it's going to be an invaluable resource and community. And I hope that you go there to that website and join the community because I would love to interact with you there. So
Yes.
make sure you check it out.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So, all right, so we're going to dive into how we can start to accomplish the goals that we've set for the year or for our 12 weeks. Like Holly talked about in episode 28, she shared with us about the idea of setting goals just for 12 weeks at a time. And many of us are really good at creating a vision or deciding on some big goals that we want to accomplish. And if you listened to last week's episode, you heard about how our personality affects our goal setting, and it's really true. But there's a couple things that hold us back, I think, from accomplishing our goals sometimes.
Mm.
So the first one is that we don't actually make a plan. So we create this big goal, and sometimes the goals are a project-based goal. We talked about the difference between a project-based goal and a habit-based goal. But sometimes we forget to actually break it down into those actionable steps. And Holly, you explained this again when we talked about the 12-week year,
Mhm.
about how to do that. So do you want to share anything or just remind people about that?
Yeah, so we've talked about this before, and it's if you have a big project that you want to complete, it's really essential to break down into smaller, more doable steps. And these bigger things may be selling your house, starting a business, launching a new ministry. Those are not things that you can wake up that morning and have done by the end of the day,
Yeah.
for the most part.
Right.
There may be those weird one offs where that might happen, but it's really important to break it down into smaller tactics and set yourself up for a plan of how and when you're going to accomplish those. And especially for me, it's important for me to assign the when, because once I create a big long list of tactics, I feel like it all has to be done yesterday.
Yeah.
So prioritizing them in a specific order is really important.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I love that.
yeah.
And that's actually one of the trainings that's going to be in the Confident Leader Club
Oh,
is you, Holly, showing
yeah.
people how to do the 12-week year in a great easy to understand format. So we have that for you. But the second and more significant reason I think that we don't reach our goals is that we fail to put systems into place to help us do that. And it kind of sounds similar to what I just said, the first point, but it's really actually different. This is about
Mhm.
habits. So, habits are the systems, the repeated actions that will help us achieve the goals we've set. And that's really what we're going to spend the majority of our time talking about today. So, I think in a lot of situations, there are the project based goals where you need to do a bunch of different kinds of steps to
Yep.
get there, right?
Mhm.
But then most of our goals, I think, are more related to the habits and the things that we do on a daily basis that will help us get there.
Yep.
So,
I agree.
habits are what shape our lives. The word habit means a settled or regular tendency or practice, especially one that is hard to give up. So, another way of saying this is that your habits are your automatic response to situations. We don't have to think about our habits, right? I don't have to think
Mhm.
about the fact that I'm going to brush my teeth before I go to bed because it's a habit. I do it every single night unless there's some kind of weird, crazy situation going on and I can't find my toothbrush or something and I'm traveling. But habits are like the foundation of our days. And so they create what our life ends up looking like.
Yeah.
And when you have a chain or a series of habits, that turns into a routine. So then we have these routines, and our routines, are kind of the way our day looks on a regular basis. So once again, we come back to the fact, though, that how we're wired will impact the way that we feel about habits.
Oh,
And
yeah.
again, Jill and I talked about this in the last episode, but Holly, I'm just curious to know for you, what is your initial reaction to this idea of habits?
I don't like them.
Right.
My first initial gut reaction when I hear the word habit is like, "Ugh," I don't want to hear about it. don't want to talk about creating them. I don't want to talk about any of that because I am a free spirit, I guess, when it comes to that stuff. I need to be able to feel the room and the space to be creative or to, you know, do whatever I feel like for that day. That sounds terrible, but I need to have some space in my life for that. If I
Yeah.
have a routine every single day, it gets very discouraging and depressing for me. I need to have those one offs or, you know, and that's not to say that I don't get stuff done or that, you know,
Yeah.
I don't have a routine in my life. But when I talk about, you know, I don't know if this is a word, but habitizing my whole entire day, that turns me off right
Yeah.
there. So,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, and so for me, the other side of the coin is that I love the idea of habits.
Yeah.
But even though I do, and even though, we talked about this, Jill and I, a bit, and as an Enneagram 1, I love goals, I love habits. I still have struggled to implement habits in my own life, and
Mhm.
I still have found that there's certain things that I just have had as an ongoing issue that I know if I were to create habits around would actually resolve itself.
Mhm.
And so, I think that depending on your personality, you're going to approach this episode differently. But I want to encourage you, even if you are in Holly's camp of, I don't want to talk about habits,
Yeah.
stick with us if you can, because I
Yep.
think we hope we both are going to share some things that hopefully will help you. So, there's two main reasons that I think habits are actually essential for our lives as leaders, both to reach goals, but also just to live a healthy life. And the first one is that habits eliminate decisions. So, as leaders, we have things coming at us on a daily basis. We have to make decisions all day long, a lot of times. We have team
Mhm.
members maybe asking things of us. We have to decide about budget cuts or hiring or firing or the direction of a ministry or business. And when you have habits and routines in place, you are able to cut down on the number of decisions you make every day.
Mm.
So, a natural result of that is that there's less stress, right? So,
Yeah.
I think even the people who love the more go with the flow and the relaxing kind of attitude towards life still want to have less stress. So, if you know you're doing X, Y, and Z on some kind of regular basis and you're not stressing about it at the last minute, that's going to help your overall mental health and your overall approach to your daily life, right?
Yeah. And so I think this is actually key. When I think about um, this point, you know, if you deal with anxiety or depression or any sort of mental health issue, honestly, this is huge because when I
Mm,
think about my day, I struggle with anxiety, and if I were to create more systematized habits in my day, it would reduce the overwhelm that I feel when I have to make another decision or when I'm feeling stressed out, having a new decision come in, it can just like, you know, it's the straw that breaks the camel's back. And
right.
so as I think about this, even though I hate, you know, talking about habits, the more that I incorporate those into my life, the less I have to deal with this sort of stress.
Yep.
And I can see myself maybe not being as snippy at my family, having the mental space to make those decisions and make them well, rather than a last minute off the cuff decision that may not, in fact, incorporate all the pros and cons or things I really need to be thinking about when I make those decisions. So I
Yeah.
think this is really important.
Yeah, for me it's kind of just like clearing the mental clutter.
Yep.
When I know what things are going to be happening and I know there's a routine or a plan or habits that I'm doing, then there's less to think about. It
Yep.
frees me up to think about those more fun things or
Hmm.
the big decisions that are really going to make a big impact.
Yeah.
So, the other thing that habits do is that they inspire others. So as leaders, people are watching us, right? They're seeing us show up day after day, week after week, whether it's at church or in our work or in our family. And when they see those consistent habits and routines, they're able to get encouragement out of that, I think. I know when I've seen other people that are just consistent and show up and aren't super sporadic, then I tend to be more likely to follow those people because they're the ones that are showing me that they're in it for the long haul. So, unfortunately, sometimes reaching our goals and creating habits is not flashy or exciting. It's not always super super fun, but it's
Yeah.
also not rocket science.
Yeah.
And so one of the books that I read was Atomic Habits by James Clear. And he said, the greatest threat to success is not failure, it's boredom.
Yeah, I totally agree with that quote. When I get bored with a goal or a habit, I just give it up. And it's so funny that you said that habits are not flashy or exciting because maybe that's why I get bored so quickly and then give up. If they were like, this big neon flashing sign that followed me throughout my day, maybe I would get annoyed, but I think at first I would stick with things a little bit longer
Mm,
because it would be exciting or whatnot. But
yeah,
yeah, he's got it right on when he makes that quote. So
yeah.
yeah.
And I agree. I mean, habits can be boring. Doing the same thing over and over again sometimes is just it's hard. It's hard work.
Mhm.
But if you know what the end result is that you're looking for, or that it's going to bring you to this next level of whatever you're looking for, whatever you feel like God has called you to do. I hear sometimes authors talk about their book writing process, and there's a lot that goes in. We see the end result, but we don't see the mornings that they got up at 4 a.m. and wrote for 3 hours before the kids got up and went to school. There's a
Yeah.
lot that goes in, and it's that daily habit that got them there.
Hmm.
So, but we do have this tendency to fight against the routine and the mundane, and
Yep.
look for a magic solution that's going to be a lot more fun and it's going to help us reach our goal 20 times faster.
Hmm.
And you all you have to do is look at our culture and look at our obsession with diets
Yeah.
versus lifestyle change to see the example of that. Everybody's looking for the next diet that's going to help them, lose the 20 pounds in a month or whatever crazy
Yeah.
time frame it is,
Hmm. Yep.
rather than simply changing what they're eating on a daily basis, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
So I think that we can agree that habits are good, even though they're not necessarily exciting. And we want to just give you some thoughts about how to implement habits in your life. And so Holly and I have both been doing a lot of reading and learning about this topic, and we're going to share with you some of what we learned. So Holly, you read a book that really is foundational to this idea of habits. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes. So before I do, I just want to make a quick comment about what we just talked about. And as I was thinking about this, as we were talking about it, it really makes me think that habits actually help us mature in our character. And if we are really hesitant or kind of buck against that system, I wonder if it shows maybe a little bit less maturity, and I'm okay with saying that because maybe that that says something about me, but I'm okay with that. I'm sure that has something to do with identity and personality a bit too, but there is something to be said about that endurance that gives us a stronger character.
Yeah.
And so, you know, even though we might have a hard time implementing them, it is something that we want to be striving for so that we can have a well-rounded character
Yeah.
and yeah, witness testimony. So
It's so funny that you said that because I pulled those 2 points, the benefits of habits, from a blog post I wrote a couple years ago.
mhm.
And there's several other points in that blog post, and one of them is that habits build endurance
Yeah.
and builds your character, so that is absolutely it's
Oh,
absolutely
that's
true.
so funny. Yeah.
I just was like, I'm not gonna put all these points in the conversation, so
Well,
you nailed it, Holly.
I made it anyway. Okay, so I read the book. Well, so I listened to the book on my Audible, The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. And I'm just going to tell you up front that this is a very scientific book with lots of experiments that are summarized, and stories about that. So if you are interested in listening to or reading this book, I just want to let you know that if you have a hard time with that. But I will say that it's not completely dry. It is anecdotal. It's not just data, data, data. But anyway, so the whole idea behind this book is that habits are a loop. And that loop starts with a cue, and then a routine, and then a reward. So, and I think we all sort of know how this goes. You wake up in the morning, that's your cue. Your routine is that maybe you go to the bathroom, brush your teeth, and get in the shower. And then your reward is that you're clean and you feel good and ready to go through the day. And the brain likes closed loops. So if you were to wake up and brush your teeth, or try to go to the bathroom, brush your teeth, and take a shower, and your water was out, that would be a stressful situation for many reasons, but also because your brain likes that closed loop.
Mm.
So creating habits and creating those routines are, you kind of got to be careful because your brain wants to close that entire loop. So you need to be making sure that your routines are healthy. The thing about it is, though, the brain then starts to expect the reward sooner than where it actually falls in that system. So the brain actually gets the cue, which is get up in the morning, and then it wants the reward a lot sooner. This creates a craving, and this craving actually drives the loop. So when you wake up in the morning, you want to feel refreshed and ready for the day, so you follow through with the routine. But these cravings are why we do things without even thinking about them. So you can go through your morning routine and be on autopilot. I know I've gotten to work before and been like, have I brushed my teeth? It's because you're doing these things on autopilot because your routine is so ingrained.
Yeah.
And honestly, this is actually a good point to say that this is part of the reason why some of these habits actually can lead to addiction, because you're doing things. If you want to put it this way, your brain is actually asleep. You're not actually thinking about, okay,
Yeah.
pick up the toothbrush, put toothpaste on it. You're on autopilot, right? So that is actually a little bit of a caution. That's kind of where addiction starts, when your brain goes to sleep and you're not critically thinking about what you're doing. But this is also why dieting can be so difficult. So if for 30 years you've had the cue of seeing a donut, the routine of buying it and eating it, and then reward of the sugar rush, your brain does not like it when you try to resist and close that loop. So it's going to cause you to be irritable or annoyed or angry. And sometimes you don't even realize why, because that that habit wants to finish that loop.
Yeah.
So that's why we do things without even thinking about them. So marketers have used this against us for years. I bet you didn't realize that taste and tingle of toothpaste doesn't actually do anything for cleaning your teeth. It's to give you a reward in your mouth. It's to give you that nice, fresh, tingly feeling. And to you, now that equals a clean mouth, when you could actually brush without that feeling and still have a clean mouth. So it's also a cue for you later in the day, if you realize, hey, I don't feel that fresh, tingly feeling, to go, hey, maybe I forgot to brush my teeth, which only reinforces that craving and reinforces that loop. So what does all this mean? That's really sciencey and really, really a lot, but that's okay. What it means for us is that changing habits is about changing the routine, but keeping the cue and the reward the same. So I'll give you an example. If you have an afternoon snacking habit at work, normally you would feel bored or tired in the afternoon. That afternoon slump hits you. You reach for a snack, you eat the snack, and the reward is that you feel distracted for a minute and you're satisfied, and then it helps you move on with your day. You get a little bit of renewed energy. But we all know that this can lead to bad consequences, especially if you're not eating the most healthy snacks. So if we keep the cue the same, where you feel bored, but you switch the routine, and instead of reaching for the snack, you go for a 5-minute walk. even just around the office, you still get the reward you're looking for of a quick distraction and the renewed energy. That's actually how it works, is changing that middle routine, but keeping the cue and keeping the reward. One final key that I thought was actually really important to talk about is belief. So the researchers found that subjects had to believe their new habit would work. And they found that this grows even more so when the belief is formed or enforced by a community. So that afternoon snacking habit will be reinforced if you take a coworker on a walk and chat about your day for a few minutes. So you're creating the belief that both of you want to have this little walk, but then you're also creating community around that. And if you one day don't want to continue with that habit, your coworker comes up to you and says, "Hey, it's time to go for that walk." That just reinforces it. And the community also creates that craving too. You want to spend that time with that person. You want to get that reward. And so it will reinforce that you want to continue with the routine of going for that walk. So I know that's a little bit deep, maybe, a little bit technical, but I think it's really important to kind of understand how your brain works when it comes to that, and how you can kind of, we'll say, hack the brain,
Yeah.
maybe. Yeah, and you can understand why sometimes routines and habits are so hard to change, because you're not thinking about it in that system: cue, routine, reward. So,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
All right. That was really helpful. Definitely very sciencey.
I
Um,
know.
but
Thanks
I
for staying with me.
Yeah, yeah. If you're still listening, thanks for sticking
Yes.
it out. And we have some more things to share, which hopefully these are going to be some practical things that you can use.
Yes.
So some of the things that I have been reading. So I've been reading a couple books. I read Atomic Habits by James Clear and Better Than Before by Gretchen Rubin. I also recently read Finish by John Acuff, which isn't specifically about habits, but it is about finishing what you start. So I thought that, I referred to that, or I've thought about that a couple times in preparing for this conversation. So
Mhm,
I want to pull out a few of the things that stood out to me from these books and some of the common themes that I saw across the board as I was
mhm.
researching this. Both of the books, Atomic Habits and Better Than Before, share some reasons that we need habits, as well as some practical strategies to implement them. So, in Better Than Before, Gretchen Rubin notes that habits make life simpler. So, this really goes in line with what we already talked
Mm.
about, the
Yep.
idea of habits eliminating decisions in our life, right? So, that's one of the benefits, one of the reasons that we should have habits in our life, is that it just makes things easier. And
Yeah.
I think we should be good with things being easier.
Yeah.
And then in Atomic Habits, Clear establishes the idea that habits are essentially the foundation of our lives. He says, habits are like the atoms of our lives. Each one is a fundamental unit that contributes to your overall unit. So
Mm.
again, a little bit sciencey because he's using this science term of atoms, but it really is the idea that all of our little habits, the little things we do throughout the day, create our life.
Yeah.
And so our in essence, our habits create our future. So
Mm.
this is also something that I shared, again, a blog post that I wrote, and I'll link it up in this in the show notes, that I wrote a couple years ago about habits. But I said success in leadership, ministry, business, marriage, or motherhood often comes from the small daily choices we make in the mundane of everyday life. So, again, it goes back to that kind of the boring stuff that
Yeah.
makes up what our life ends up being in the end, right? So, another thing that really stood out to me from Atomic Habits was the connection that Clear made between habits and our identity. He
Mm.
says that we make decisions about our behavior based on our identity. So, one way to change your habit is to change how you view yourself. And this was really interesting to me because one of the things we've talked about on this podcast a lot is the importance of our identity and the value in believing the truth about who God says we are versus what others have said or what we have maybe told ourselves in the past. And in episode 6, I shared about the importance of leading with confidence and how that starts with accepting that you're fully loved by God. And in that episode, I also shared about our Confident Leader Manifesto, and that helps us to remind ourselves of our identity.
Hmm.
So I think that it was just really interesting to me to see this connection between identity and habits. And you said something about the book you read talked about belief as well. Did he talk about that?
Yeah. So um, he talked a lot about actually AA and how they encourage the belief in a higher power. When AA was newer, it was in fact God, but um, belief in a higher power and community around that really enforces habits even more so in our minds, and in our hearts. And so those sorts of things actually guide our habits. So yeah,
Yeah.
it
Okay.
definitely all connects.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess I had just never really thought about this. So as I was listening to this book and thinking about some of the things I've told myself, something that
Hmm.
I've said for a long time is I'm not a good housekeeper. I'm great at business, I'm great at numbers, but I'm just not good at this whole house thing. So
Yeah.
I realized that that statement makes it easier for me to neglect creating habits around my home because
Hmm.
I'm buying into the belief that my identity is I'm not good at this, right?
Yep.
But if I were to shift the statement from what I was saying before to I'm learning to be a good housekeeper, or even I rock at taking care of my home. If I start saying that instead, I'm probably going to be more likely to develop the habit of cleaning up my kitchen each day, as an example. So it's just something to be aware of as you're thinking about this whole issue of habits in your life is what are you telling yourself about who you are and how is that impacting the choices you're making each day?
Yep.
So, in order to reach a goal, you might need to change your perception around your identity. And James also says true behavior change is identity change. And if you think about this in the context of faith and Christianity, isn't that what our faith is supposed to do for us? Like we are supposed to be constantly changing and
Yeah.
growing more like Christ, which a lot of times involves denying ourselves and what we really want and
Mm.
making choices that are going to benefit others and that are going to be honoring to Christ. And so I think that we can connect this with our faith in that
Yeah.
sometimes creating these new habits is actually a way to honor God, right?
Mhm.
The other thing that James Clear talks about is thinking more about who you want to become rather than what you want to accomplish. And I just thought that was really powerful
Oh,
that,
yeah.
ultimately at the end of your life, people are going to more think about who you are than all the things you did
Mhm.
and the person that you become, so the habits that we create can help us become that type of person that we want to be in the power sheets. And I think Jill mentioned this in our last episode, but in the power sheets there's a question that's something about who do you want to be when you're 80 or when you're
Mm.
85 or something like that. It gets you thinking about way down the road, what type of person do you want to be?
Yeah.
So that can impact how we structure our habits or how we make choices around our habits. So there's a couple other common threads that I saw when I was reading through these books that are things that will help us as we start implementing habits. So one of them is self-awareness. And again, this is something that we keep going back
Yep.
to.
Back
And
to
and
Rootsman.
yeah, and James Clear talks about this, but Gretchen Rubin also talks about this, that really there are a lot of different strategies that you can put into place to develop habits. And not all of them are going to necessarily work for every person. And so to
Mhm.
think about this in the context of your personality, how God has wired you, what helps you to make progress in your own life, and to be aware of that. And you can use these if you read Better Than Before, you'll get like dozens of ideas. And she actually has like a printout, and I'll try to link to it, a checklist that you can refer to that is a quick and easy guide to those items. um, but you can pick which ones you think are going to be most beneficial to you. Clear has a more methodical approach. He says that there's
Mhm.
4 laws of behavior, and he believes those would apply to everyone. But within those laws, again, he gave several strategies that you could choose to implement. And again, my take is that you might not necessarily use all of the strategies, but you might find some that work for you. So, another common thread that I found in these books is the importance of scheduling. So,
Mm.
knowing when you are going to do a new habit is a very important strategy. If you say you're going to start getting up earlier, but you don't decide when you're going to start doing that new habit or what time earlier is, then you're probably not going to do it, right? Have you ever,
Are you talking to me?
Holly, I'm not talking to you directly.
I think you're
I
talking directly to
I
me.
am talking to you because we're talking on this podcast, but
I
have
know.
you ever do you think that you've ever done this where you've been like, "I'm gonna start this new habit," but you haven't really scheduled it or made it really clear when you're gonna do that? Have you ever run into
Oh,
that?
yeah. It's exactly the example you gave. I always wanna get up earlier. Well, okay. So, when I think about, you know, getting better at things and being more productive, then I want to try to get up earlier, but I don't actually want to get up earlier.
Yeah, yeah.
But so that's maybe why I don't actually say I'm going to get up at this time or whatever. I do set my alarm earlier, but I set it for like, for example, 8:15, 8:30, 8:45. You know what I mean? Like, so that doesn't really help me either. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I have done it so I have managed to develop the habit of getting up earlier for
Mhm.
the most part. Now there's still days that I do let myself sleep in, but I have gotten that a little bit better than 5 years ago.
Yeah.
However, I have done the opposite where I've been like, I'm gonna go to bed earlier. That is a thing I wanna do, right? That's a goal I have. That's like, I know
Mhm.
I should do it. It will help me get up. It'll help me be more productive.
Yep.
Uh, but then I do the same thing that you just said where I don't say what time I actually am
Yep.
gonna go to bed.
Mhm.
I
Yep.
don't actually set a reminder or an alarm on my phone to tell me to go to bed.
Mhm.
And I think it goes back to, do you actually want that change?
Yeah.
So you really have to figure out, when you're thinking about habits and goals, we've said this so many times, but what's the why? And
Mhm.
do you really want this to happen? Because if
Yeah.
not, you're not going to actually find a way to implement it.
Yeah, no, I
So
don't. No, I
you
don't
don't
want
want to get up earlier. You
I
want to sleep.
don't. But
That's
I
okay.
wanna be productive.
Right.
So, yeah. Mm.
Okay. So another common thread that I found in these books is the idea of habit stacking or pairing. So this is the strategy of a habit. So you already have a habit in place in your life, and you decide to pair or stack another habit on top of it. So it's kind of like you were saying earlier, Holly, your morning routine consists of getting out of bed, brushing your teeth, taking a shower, and getting dressed, right? So maybe you want to add the habit of doing 10 push ups in there, or
Ooh.
10 squats or something. I don't know, some form of exercise. I feel like there's a lot of people that exercise in the morning. So that's a
Mhm.
good habit, right? So you
You're
might
probably
say,
right.
before I get in the shower, I'm going
Mhm.
to do 10 squats or whatever it
Yep.
is. And so you're pairing a habit that's already pre-existing with the new habit that you want to establish. And that's really effective for a lot of people. Um, Another one is the idea of not breaking the chain. And that's
Mm.
where you're actually just trying to like keep it going, keep the habit going for as many days in a row as you can.
Oh, yeah.
And I heard this in all 3 books, actually in Atomic Habits and Gretchen Rubin's Better Than Before, and also in another book that I'm reading, which isn't about habits at all, but it's Deep Work by Cal Newport. It's about the ability to focus and get deep work done in your life. And that one is very sciencey too. If you if you really like scientific stuff and data, you get into that book. I have not gotten through that one yet, but all of them referenced Jerry Seinfeld's interview or something where he was talking about how he developed the ability to write great jokes. And he
Oh,
just decided to write jokes every single day and not break the chain.
oh,
And so
that's so
the idea
funny.
is that you just do the same thing every day. And your goal is just to not break the chain.
Oh,
So, and if you think about it, most of us get kind of excited about being able to check something off every day for several days in a row. And then clarity is the last one. And again, I'm scratching the surface of these because there's so much you could get out of these books. So if you go and read them yourself, you'll find some. But I tried to pick some that I was hearing in multiple ways. And
mhm,
clarity is absolutely essential to know exactly what habit you're working on and exactly how you're going to implement it. So just like we were talking about this issue of getting up earlier in the morning, if you don't have clarity on it, if you don't
yeah,
actually know for sure if you want to do it, that's a lack of
mhm,
clarity. If you don't know when you're going to start doing it, that's a lack of clarity. And if you don't say, I'm going to start getting up at 7 a.m. or 6 a.m. or whatever it is, again, lack of clarity, you're probably not going to follow through. So, James Clear says this: many people think they lack motivation when what they really lack is clarity.
yeah, that's good.
I just love that because I think there's so many times where we beat ourselves up because we're not motivated. We think we're not motivated to do something, but it's just that we haven't gotten clear on what we really want.
Mhm,
So, Gretchen also says a very similar thing. She says, the clearer I am about what I value and about what action I expect from myself, not what other people value or expect from me, the more likely I am to stick to my habits.
mm,
So, again, going back to this really goes back to the beginning of the goal setting series where we talked about, the reflecting on your previous year, but then getting into dreaming and creating a vision. It's about what do you want your life to look like and what are the values that you hold dear, because that's going to influence your habits. It's going to influence how you take action on all of this.
yeah, and I think this is actually a great point to kind of say, these are great, like this clarity section, this is a great thing to talk to a mentor about. Um, in fact, I told Esther some of my goals, and she was like, but wait, hold on a second. What about this? What about that? And I was able to actually just completely get rid of a goal because after talking to her, I was more clear on what I actually needed to do. And the thing that I thought I needed to do was not something I needed to do at all.
Right.
And so, and that really helped me focus on what I needed to do for my business. She was helping me with my business. And so, talking to someone that's a little bit ahead of you in business or in ministry, that mentor can really help you with your clarity and can help you push aside those extraneous things that sort of muddy the water. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And I can't remember where it was that I heard this or if maybe one of our guests said this in an interview that I've done, but um, it's like the importance of asking the question why. So if I say I want to go to bed earlier,
Yeah.
okay, why do I want to do that? And then I give my answer and then another why. And you keep asking why until you get to the core, the deep, dark foundation of what it is that you're wanting
Mhm.
or the reason you're doing something. And then you can figure out, okay, is that actually something I want to do or not? So
Yeah.
I think the clarity thing is so key. So there's really two key takeaways that I have from this conversation that I want to share. And Holly, if you have one, I'd love to hear yours as well.
Mhm.
But mine are that if you want to accomplish your goals, or if you want to have a year of purpose and you want to have, you know, make an impact in your life, then you really just need to focus on creating the habits that will help you do that. So that's the first one, even though it's not fun or super exciting. And James Clear, again, another quote from him, he said, if you want better results, forget about setting goals and focus on your system instead. Now,
Mm,
he wasn't necessarily saying don't set goals. Okay. And
right.
I'm not saying that either. But the idea is that a lot of us set the goals and we don't do anything with the system. We don't do
Yep.
anything with creating these habits, and that's where the action is going to actually take place.
Mhm.
Secondly, my second takeaway is to focus more on who you're becoming rather than what you're trying to accomplish.
Mm.
So again, I might set some goals around specific things that I want to do, but what really matters in the long run is who I am becoming and who God is calling me to be rather than all the things I do. So I just think that's a powerful reminder and something that I want us to hold on to.
Yeah. So I think for me, as far as a takeaway, is not any really direct quote, but sort of how I interpret all of the things we've been talking about. And for myself, it really is, it's going to be super simple and you're probably going to laugh at me, but it is just do it. So I get so bogged down in how I feel about it and how I feel about actually having to, for example, get up earlier. That's not something I feel like I want to do. But if you noticed, a lot of these strategies or all of these strategies had nothing to do with how we feel about it.
Yeah, it's yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't read a lot about how you feel in these books.
No. So, and I have no problem with with the little quote, fake it till you make it. I sometimes have to push myself to do things before I actually want to do them.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of been my takeaway from this is to focus less on how I feel, and more on the things that will help me succeed, that will create less stress, create a little bit more mental margin, all of those things, which I think these habits would definitely do.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so that's my takeaway. I
Okay.
know.
Okay. I'm going to
Um,
sorry, I'm going to add one more thing that I
mhm.
forgot to mention, and it's super important. So and it goes in line with what you said earlier about when you
Okay.
mentioned the example of AA
Yeah.
and the idea that accountability and
Mm,
community can make a really big difference in accomplishing goals and
yeah.
creating habits. So um that is something that I heard again in multiple scenarios that
Mm,
even if you are a personality type that doesn't that is motivated internally, you can still benefit from accountability. And
mhm.
even if you're a personality type that maybe doesn't really love having people check in on you and follow up, there's
Yeah.
still something about that community aspect that
Mhm.
almost all of us can benefit from. So I
Oh,
did want to
absolutely.
point that out too. I don't know why I forgot to mention that earlier.
That's
I
okay.
did have that as one of my points.
I
So,
think that's really good. And I think that's part of what we were talking about, like the mentoring. They can help give you clarity, but then they
yeah.
can also ask you how you're doing on these
Yeah.
habits.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so one final point that I think is really crucial is your value doesn't come from your habits. You are loved by God no matter what. So if you're struggling with this, or if it's hard for you, like it's hard for me, don't beat yourself up or think that you are less than. Um, your habits, or how you set habits, how you accomplish habits, how you fail at your habits has nothing to do with your value.
Yeah.
So we want you to hear that loud and clear from us. We believe that leaders are learners, and that's one of the reasons that we go so deep into these things, because we want to learn about ourselves and to learn how to be successful. But in the end, your worth comes from God and not from the things that you do.
Absolutely,
So,
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, and that really this this is so important for you to
yeah.
remember, and the idea of doing it with other people that can walk
Mhm.
alongside you and support you
Yeah.
is really one of the biggest, the ways that I've been able to make change in my own life is
Mhm.
through the support of other people that have
Yeah.
said, "Hey, I'll do this new thing with you. I'll help you X, Y, or Z," and that just makes such a difference. So, again,
Yeah.
that's actually one of the things that I plan on focusing on in the Confident Leader Club is us working together on specific habits or specific goals that we are trying to accomplish, and that we can provide
Mhm.
some more in-depth community around that. So
That's great.
yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. So, all right. So I think we are ready to wrap up this conversation. So,
Yeah.
Holly, we always like to end with a fun question, especially since this
Mhm.
conversation was kind of like pretty deep.
Really in depth.
Let's
Yeah,
end with something a little more fun. And I will just say right now, you're in Canada
I
right
am.
now for
Mhm.
a short minute, and
Mhm.
it's still in Maine, living in Maine, and it is really cold. So let's
It's
talk about traveling.
yeah, it's really, really cold. Oh, I'm not used to it anymore.
I'll just share in case anybody is really curious about what we're talking about. In Maine on Saturday, I asked Alexa what the wind chill was, and she told me it was -12. And so I was like, yeah, I'm not going outside.
Yeah, and in Nova Scotia on Saturday, we got 6 inches of snow, so
Right. Yes. So you're excited to go back to Florida, but Holly, if
yes.
you could travel anywhere in the world that you've never been before, where would it be and why?
This is so easy. I want to go to Italy so bad. I think it's because it's so romanticized in movies. Like, I'm gonna wear, like, a gorgeous white dress, and I'm gonna go through the vineyards. My hair is gonna be flowing, and there's gonna be birds singing,
That does sound like a magical place.
and I'm gonna eat pasta. Yeah, I just think it looks so
Mm,
much fun, and the people look super um kind and like have a zest for life.
mhm,
I feel like they're so into relationship there, and
mhm.
I just feel like if I went there I would meet like my new best friend for the rest of my life.
That's amazing. Okay, so if you're listening to this podcast and you're in Italy,
Yeah.
drop us a line,
Yes.
leave us a comment,
Mhm.
join us in our Facebook group, tell
Yeah.
Holly, and maybe, who knows, maybe you will find a connection.
Yeah,
So
if you want to make me homemade pasta and let me drink your your wine by your vineyard, I will be right there.
okay. Yes. All right. Tour.
Okay.
We've talked about going on a tour, the confidence.
Yes.
I mean, the Christian Women Leadership podcast
Yeah.
tour. So hey, Italy
Oh,
could be our first stop.
yeah. I'm all about it. Okay.
Oh,
Where would you like to go that you've never been? I guess the question I should ask is where's the next stop on our tour
okay. Okay.
after
So
Italy?
that's good. All right. I would love to go to New Zealand.
Mm,
So I have
yeah.
seen photos of New Zealand. I have a
Mhm.
friend who went there for like a month, and it's just
Yeah.
amazing. I love mountains. I love the ocean. I love just
Mm.
exploring nature, and it just looks very naturey. So I think it would be really fun.
I think it's so
Um,
funny that mine was focused around
uh,
food and yours
yeah,
was focused around nature.
don't get me wrong. I
Yeah,
love food too. I
you
mean,
love a good meal.
yeah, I love a good meal, and I will eat a lot of food, but I'm gonna if I pick a place to travel to, I'm gonna be more focused on what kind of
Yeah,
activities I can do in the new
yeah.
place. So, yeah.
I'm gonna have to do a little bit of digging to figure out what New Zealand food is like
Oh, yeah, I have no idea.
so that we can know what we're looking forward to.
Okay. Yeah.
I bet
On
there's a
this
lot of
hypothetical tour that we're going
yes. I bet there's lots of fish dishes, which I'm all about.
Oh,
So,
I
yeah.
hope that they don't eat, like, insects. I feel like maybe
Would
that's
you eat
Papua New
them?
Guinea. I don't know.
Would you eat them?
I would prefer not to,
Yeah.
but I have traveled a lot, and I have
Yeah,
eaten some things that normally I wouldn't want to eat.
right.
I don't
You
think
are adventurous.
I've never eaten an insect though, not to my knowledge.
I was just gonna say that you know of.
Oh,
And with that,
yes, with that, okay, so we just wanna tell you, if you're still listening, we try to save this crazy talk to the end of the podcast so that, we don't annoy you at the beginning of the podcast. So, anyway, thanks for sticking with us. We hope that this conversation has been helpful. If you want to talk more about habits, come over to our Purposeful Leadership Facebook group and join us, and we will chat more there.
Yeah, we'd love to see you.
Thanks for joining us on the Christian Women Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, come and join us in our private Facebook community. We would love to get to know you better so that we can make sure the podcast is providing what you need. Plus, you can share your questions and ideas, and you'll be surrounded by incredible Christian women leaders. To join the group, visit estherlittlefield.com/group. Now, don't forget, your leadership matters, and it's time for you to embrace your gifts and lead with confidence.